This is Momma. Yes, a cat. And one of the best mothers that I've ever met on the face of the earth, human and animal. Many of you know the story of how Momma came into our lives. She was our former neighbor's cat. And a couple of summers ago, she became pregnant and delivered 3 little kittens, a male and 2 females. As is typical in the summertime, the kids like to go in and out, playing outdoors, then coming back inside for a snack or just to talk to someone else. And they often let the door hanging open. And one day, shortly after giving birth to these 3 kittens, Momma carried each of these 3 kittens by the nape of the neck upstairs into our 2 boys' bedroom and placed those 3 kittens into a little nest she had made underneath our son's bunk bed. Now you need to understand that we've never been pet people. With all of the things that we feel that God has called us to do with ministry, having a large family, and everything else, we just didn't feel like we had time for pets in our lives. But when Momma brought her 3 little kittens into our house, well, I guess the writing was on the wall. And we still have all 4 cats to this day. The sacrifice that we see in Momma is incredible. Even to this day, although all 3 of her kittens are adults, she often waits to let them eat first, allowing them to have the lion's share, if you will. She taught those kittens so well. They know how to groom themselves and keep themselves clean. Our cats are tremendous hunters, and they often keep the rodent population at a minimum near our property. And I read somewhere that without the training of the mother, cats don't instinctively know how to hunt. And so she must have done an incredible job, because the kittens often bring a rodent or 2 to the front door or lay it on the driveway for us to inspect. And there's a tender nature to Momma's demeanor. Never once have I seen her scratch one of us or bite at one of us. She's docile, tender. She is seemingly as patient as an animal can come. We didn't know this when Momma first came into our lives, but we found out by her demeanor that she was abused. Anytime you pick up a broom to sweep the kitchen floor, she goes running, an indicator that she was beaten numerous times with a broom or something similar. She even has an arch in her back and is unable to walk properly because of some of this abuse. We suspected some of this because of the things that we heard, but we never really knew it for sure until we saw her up close. And even to this day, when you go to pet her, she winces as though instead of showing affection to her, you're going to hurt her. I'll be honest, it makes me sad to see her in such a condition. How is it that such a wonderful mama cat could experience such devastation? Sadly, Momma's story is the story of so many humans as well. Estimates today vary between 1 in every 3 to 1 in every other person being a victim of abuse. And the thing is that, unfortunately, there have been some high-profile cases of people who have faked abuse, that oftentimes people think that abuse is not real, or at least it's not common. And nothing could be further from the truth. 1 out of every 4 people walking the face of the earth has experienced sexual abuse, to be violated in the most intimate and violent way. And the sad reality is that those who have experienced abuse are much more likely to perpetuate that cycle as they become adults. They often pass this abuse on to the next generation. When it comes to abuse, the church is not immune from this. Christians have experienced abuse, not only from people in general, but oftentimes by Christians as well. Whether it's physical or sexual or verbal or even spiritual abuse, it is commonplace in our world. And I want to say this and say it clearly. If you've been abused, I know that it's sometimes a struggle just to get out of bed in the morning, let alone to be able to function at a high level. And yet I've seen so many people that have been in the depths of despair and experienced the most heinous of abusive actions against them, that have been able through time to be able to work through that and be highly effective and passionate people who make the world a better place. There's a psalm in the Bible. It's not one of the most common psalms. It's not one that many people have put to memory, but it speaks, I believe, for those who have experienced the worst from other people. It's Psalm 10. Why, O Lord, do you stand far off? Why do you hide yourself in times of trouble? In his arrogance, the wicked man hunts down the weak, who are caught in the schemes he devises. He boasts of the cravings of his heart. He blesses the greedy and reviles the Lord. In his pride, the wicked does not seek him. In all his thoughts, there is no room for God. His ways are always prosperous. He is haughty, and your laws are far from him. He sneers at all his enemies. He says to himself, nothing will shake me. I'll always be happy and never have trouble. His mouth is full of curses and lies and threats. Trouble and evil are under his tongue. He lies in wait near the villages. From ambush he murders the innocent, watching in secret for his victims. He lies in wait like a lion in cover. He lies in wait to catch the helpless. He catches the helpless and drags them off in his net. His victims are crushed. They collapse. They fall under his strength. He says to himself, God has forgotten. He covers his face and never sees. Arise, Lord. Lift up your hand, O God. Do not forget the helpless. Why does the wicked man revile God? Why does he say to himself, he won't call me to account? But you, O God, do see trouble and grief. You consider it to take it in hand. The victim commits himself to you. You are the helper of the fatherless. Break the arm of the wicked and evil man. Call him to account for his wickedness that would not be found out. The Lord is king forever and ever. The nations will perish from his land. You hear, O Lord, the desire of the afflicted. You encourage them and you listen to their cry, defending the fatherless and the oppressed, in order that man who is of the earth may terrify no more. I appreciate so much the rawness of this psalm, the honesty of the psalm writer. You can feel the pain that they're experiencing. You can feel the sense of abandonment, even questioning where is God in all of this. There's honesty, there's pain, and it's real. And for so many of you, this is your story. This is what you've experienced. I mean, all of us have been wronged, but some of us have been wronged in ways that have damaged us at deep, deep levels. As usual, I don't want to tear apart this psalm too much, But notice that the bulk of it is actually a lament to God. God, why do those who are oppressive, who take advantage of other people, yes, and even those who abuse, why do they seem to prosper? Why do they seem to get away with what they've done? Why do they never seem to be called to account? But there are also several lines of hope, statements about God who sees the pain that the psalm writer is going through, that knows the hurt that's in existence in the world, and that ultimately he will bring justice. But the question is there anything that can bring hope right now? And I believe the answer is an emphatic yes. But it takes a lot of hard work. It takes a lot of remembering, being willing to experience pain over and over again so that ultimately over time you might be able to experience freedom and appropriate love and hope. So often as Christians, we want to get to hope so quickly that we don't spend any time whatsoever lingering in the pain that is being experienced by people, in acknowledging sin that exists in the world, and being honest about how awful we can be toward one another. And so I want to camp there for just a little while. It's commonplace for pastors and other Christians to tell people who have experienced abuse to forgive and forget. And this is unfortunately really bad advice. Forgiveness, yes, is something that we should be brought to. But to forget, well, to be able to forgive, you have to be able to remember what went on. In fact, oftentimes in the most powerful abusive situations, you have to remember again and again and again and process with somebody who can really help you in order to be set free, in order to be able to make the decisive decision that you're going to forgive. The more traumatic, the more frequent, the longer the time that you have experienced abuse, the more difficult it becomes to get to the point where you can actually forgive the person who has violated you. And I would never advise somebody that you need to simply forgive somebody and then go on with your life as though it hasn't happened. Rather, something important happens in that processing with somebody who has been trained to help people along that journey, whether it's a counselor or a pastor, or on occasion, a really good friend who understands the nature of human beings at a deep level. But almost always, you need to reach out for help. I can't think of a single situation where somebody who has experienced deep abuse has been able to get through that process of healing without assistance from others, and especially from God. The danger here is that so oftentimes, especially if you are abused by a man, it's difficult to turn to God because he's referred to as our Father. There are some resources that I'll give you as a link in the description below that you can actually go to and read about ways that you can develop a biblical and right understanding of who God is, because oftentimes our images of God become distorted because of the abuse that we've experienced. One of the dangers that I see over and over again is that people who have been deeply abused, they try to get back at the other person. And this almost always manifests itself in destructive behavior for the one who has been abused. Whether it's acting out sexually or harboring bitterness and anger that just controls the person, or defiantly pretending that there hasn't been a problem and then being overwhelmed with anxiety and fear. I see these all the time. And almost always the sad thing is that the person who has abused continues to have control over the one who was abused. and it manifests itself in devastating ways. At this point, some of you may be wondering, why haven't I emphasized God more? Why haven't I told people to turn to Jesus? Well, of course, that's important. But oftentimes, people fear God who have been abused because of what I stated earlier. And so there is this slow process that requires us to be real about what's taken place in our lives, and at the same time rekindling our relationship with God and understanding who He is rightfully. And that process can take months or years, even the rest of your life. But it's a journey, may I encourage you, that is worthwhile. Because it's better to experience the pain for a certain period of time, intense as it may be, than to live in misery every single day you walk the face of the earth. A lot of people who have experienced abuse, they ask the question, where was God? Why did He allow it to happen? Why didn't He prevent it? The answer is that God was there, and He's still here. And the reason that He doesn't prevent every single thing is that we as human beings have free will. We have choice. And part of the broken, sinful nature of the world around us, and we're not immune from it either. Even those who have been abused, we're all sinners. And so abuse ends up becoming a manifestation of the sin problem that we have. By no means would I ever suggest that God wanted you to experience abuse. It's fundamentally against His nature. He's a loving God. But here's the thing that I have noticed in people who have worked through the abuse they've experienced and ended up experiencing healing and hope and a right relationship with God and other people. Often the abuse has led them to understand the deep need for God at a level they never could have understood otherwise. Those who have a deep understanding of the depravity of human beings are more apt to understand the overflowing and unconditional nature of God's love. And in the middle of that, we're reminded of our desperate need for God and that we can't solve the sin problem ourselves. Only Jesus Christ and the work that He did on the cross can accomplish that for us. In this psalm, God is referred to as the one who watches over the fatherless, the one who cares for the victim, the one who will ultimately bring justice. Yes, people in this lifetime may feel like they're getting away with it, but there will be a day when we will give an account. There will be a reckoning. And the Bible says, vengeance is mine. This doesn't negate the fact that there could be criminal charges placed against someone who has carried out abuse. That's part of justice. It's part of love, believe it or not. But at the same time, it's not our duty to carry out that vengeance. It's God's. The church is getting better over time in understanding that abuse is real and that Christians aren't immune from it. They're also not immune from carrying out abuse. But we can continue to do better and better. So whether you've been abused or not, all of us have an important part to play in recognizing abuse, in helping one another, especially those who have experienced abuse, to call out abuse when we see it, to not protect those who have been abusers, enabling them to continue to abuse. And so as a community of faith, it's part of our role to be aware of what's going on around us, to understand that when somebody comes to us in our discipleship group or a close friend and confides something in us, that we have an obligation to be an advocate for them. You know, the thing about Mama Cat is that she'll cycle around in our house to different locations where she'll spend the bulk of her time. Right now it's on the ledge of one of our sofas. A few weeks ago, she spent a couple of weeks on the rocking chair with a blanket underneath her. Before that, it was directly over one of the heater vents at the edge of our kitchen. And still other times, it may be somewhere in the middle of the floor, in the same spot. And I think what's going on is she's trying to find a spot where she can feel and experience life and security. Of course, she's an animal, not a human being. But there are a lot of parallels here. And I think a lot of times when we've been abused, we often reach for things that help us to cope, whether it's substances or an overemphasis on the way that we look, or caring too greatly about what other people think about us, or other destructive behaviors. I'm here to tell you that there is a community that wants to walk with you. That God, even though it seems like He's been far away, has been there all of the time. And He wants to restore you. Forgiveness is often a misunderstood concept. Yes, there is something to be said for the day where we make the decision that we choose to forgive. But that doesn't mean that there's not a process after that to continue to forgive over and over and over again, daily. My prayer is that our community would become more and more healthy as we're honest about this difficult subject of abuse. To know that God sees, that He's here and He wants to help you. And that oftentimes you may need to turn to other people, professional people, to process everything that's gone on so that you can experience healing. I highly recommend that if you have not done that you would reach out to one of these resources or contact me. May God bless you and our community of faith as we acknowledge abuse for what it is and work diligently and not allow it to be an acceptable practice in our lives or in the people that we have covenanted with and are called to walk in accountable relationships with as the church. May God bless you as you make difficult decisions, perhaps, on how to reach out for help. And may all of us, may we be advocates for relationships that are healthy and good and pleasing to God. May it be so. Amen.